Okay, so any questions, comments, observations?
I have a question from actually last week, Monday.
From last week?
Yes. Last week you told us the story of Nanda, Buddha's half-brother, and how at his wedding, how Buddha...
Oh, that's Nanda, yeah.
Yes, Buddha almost compelled him to become a monk.
Yeah.
So how do you manage to keep faith in the three treasures of Buddha and his Dharma in spite of certain stories like that?
Yeah.
They seem to go against other teachings we hear.
Yeah. Okay, so just to review, like this is the story. I think I said last week that the Buddha never compelled anybody to become a monastic against their will. But then I said that one exception comes to mind, and this is the story of Nanda, the Buddha's half-brother, who at his wedding ceremony, the Buddha attended, recited the blessing, had the meal offering, then asked Nanda to carry the alms bowl back to the monastery for him. And so Nanda, being the younger brother, felt obliged to accept, and he carried the bowl. Then the Buddha turned to Nanda and said, "Would you like to become a monk?" And Nanda didn't want to become a monk. He actually wanted to go back to finish the wedding ceremony. But he felt sort of obliged to concede to his elder brother, so he said yes. And then the Buddha ordained him. Okay, but the way the story continues, and I have to say there's something I don't like in the story. Okay, so Nanda afterwards was living the monastic life, always dissatisfied, always thinking about his beloved fiancée that he left behind, and sort of yearning to go back there. And so the other monks learned about this, and they were sort of ridiculing Nanda because he was not really living the monastic life earnestly. So then the Buddha thought to remedy the situation, and so he took Nanda on a trip to some of the heavenly worlds. And then they went to this particular heavenly world where there were these beautiful celestial nymphs who came to Nanda and worshipped his feet. And then the Buddha asked Nanda, "What do you think about these celestial nymphs?" And Nanda said, "Oh, they're just so unimaginably beautiful. Compared to them, my fiancée, who was considered the most beautiful girl among the Sakyans, now looks horrible." What I don't like is this sort of like basing love upon physical appearance. But anyway, then the Buddha said, "I guarantee you that if you live the spiritual life earnestly, you'll be reborn in this heavenly world, and you will have so many of these celestial nymphs as your partners." Okay, so then they came back to the human realm, and then Nanda started to practice meditation very diligently. And the monks asked, "Wow, there's been such a remarkable change in you. What is the reason for this change?" And Nanda told them that the Buddha took me to this heavenly world and promised that if I live a very diligent monk's life, I'll be reborn there and I'll get to have so many celestial nymphs as my partners. And then the other monks started to ridicule Nanda and saying that you're living the spiritual life just as a kind of, what's the expression he used? It was a special word that he used, as a kind of hireling, like a hireling, just to be able to enjoy sensual pleasures with those celestial nymphs. And so they ridiculed him, and then Nanda felt ashamed about this. And then he realized that he should practice not for rebirth in the heaven, but to gain liberation. And so then he started to practice very earnestly, and he became an arahat. And so the justification for this action on the part of the Buddha is that the Buddha would have foreseen that he would have seen that Nanda had the potential to achieve arahatship, and this sort of forcing him to become a monk and then bringing him to this heavenly world was the skillful means to induce him to make the effort to achieve arhatship. So that is the justification for it. I have to say, I don't really like the story that much, but it's not going to shake my faith in the Buddha. Somebody else want to comment on that?
Bhante, there was a question before from the internet asking the Pure Land, not pure abode, Pure Land, how does it fit into the 31 realms?
The Pure Land of Amitabha?
Yeah.
It doesn't actually fit into the scheme of the 30 so realms of existence. I mean, it's a concept that comes later in the sutras of Mahayana Buddhism, that in the past there was a bodhisattva named Dharmakara who had made a vow in the future to establish a Pure Land, supposedly in the West, on the condition, and that Pure Land would be such that those human beings who recite his name 10 times, or another account continuously up to 7 days, will be reborn in that Pure Land. So that Pure Land, it's not one of the realms of existence, but it's another, let's say, it's another world system, different from the world system in which we're living. And that world system is presided over by the Buddha Amitabha. And the special feature of that Pure Land is that it's supposed to provide the conditions for one to progress continuously without possibility of relapse, falling down to lower realms. So it's supposed to provide like all of the ideal conditions for progress, so that one is always in the presence of Amitabha Buddha, listening to discourses by Amitabha Buddha. One is surrounded by thousands and thousands of great bodhisattvas, always ready to give one help and assistance. But it doesn't fit into the scheme. I would say that it's probably a development out of the concept of the pure abodes in the early Buddhist cosmology.
Bhante, in the sutta where Ananda was discussing the regulations and the lifestyles,
Discussing
in the sutta they were discussing the Buddha and Ananda were discussing the regulations, rules, and lifestyles of ascetic practices. Do the rites and the chanting and the practices that we see in Mahayana, especially in Pure Land, let's say school, do they fit into that scheme? Are they also guided by the same test, that if they help you eliminate unwholesome states, will be useful, or they are just some form that is not helpful in any way?
Yeah, this all depends on the on the use that one makes of them. And this is true of like any kind of ritual, whether it's Buddhist ritual or Hindu ritual or Christian ritual. If it's just, one just goes through it mechanically without having any understanding, without any mental application to it, then it's just an empty ritual. But if one uses it as, in the case of the Buddhist case, the Buddhist example, is a way to cultivate faith and devotion, and to cultivate mindfulness and an understanding of the Dhamma, then it becomes a means for developing wholesome qualities. Then it's positive. Sometimes this expression "sila-bhatta" that I showed is translated rites and rituals. And then it's said that Buddhism rejects, so the Buddha rejected all rites and rituals, And so then when people come to Buddhist temples and they see that the Buddhists are doing chanting and rituals, they think that this is a departure from the original intention of the Buddha, that the Buddha wanted his disciples no rituals, no ceremonies, nothing, just sitting in meditation. But in fact, I think probably even from the time of the Buddha himself, there was some kind of very simple ceremonies and rituals. And these are ways, I say, of channeling faith and devotion into standardized forms, which makes it easy to replicate them and to transmit these forms from one generation to the next. And they're sort of like molds into which we could pour the liquid of our faith and devotion. And they can become then used skillfully as means of cultivating wholesome qualities. But if one just goes through them mechanically, thinking about how are the Yankees doing? Is it the baseball season now? How are the Yankees doing? How are the Mets doing? How are my stocks doing? Or with the idea that just by doing these rituals, I'm going to store up so many heaps of merit, then it becomes an empty ritual or a basis of attachment.
So I have the microphone unintentionally, so I might also say something. I wanted to say, when reading the suttas, we hardly read how they actually, the early generation of Savakas, memorized what they just heard. But it's obvious that they must have done so, because otherwise it would have had no transmission, as you just said. And at certain occasions we read also that, for instance, this young monk who ordained without knowing the Buddha, when he came to the Buddha said, "Can you recite something for me?" And he recited parts of what is now in the Tiki-nipata. And we learn, and the Buddha praised how nicely he was chanting or reciting it. And I think that this is not a ritual, but as a vital part of Buddhist practice, that one has to reflect on the Dhamma by first learning it, first knowing it. And I find this very important when that one has to not just read it, but also get familiar with the text, and by chanting or some kind of recitation, reflect upon it. I found that very helpful for also meditation practice. And I think that is maybe a little bit out of sight, that this is a vital part since the beginning of Buddhist, not ceremony, but at least practice, this reciting of teaching and points even.
You mean as a kind of original form of what later became like a ritualized practice? Is that the
I mean, like in Sri Lanka, you have this parita chanting, right?
The parita chanting,
chanting. But I believe by reading the suttas that almost everything that the Buddha said was memorized and used as a reflection and compared with each other, and then slowly these banakas evolved to memorized whole collection of it. Right? And I think that still it looks like a ceremony, or it could be in the part of Sila Patta. But it's actually a very important practice that is maybe not practiced enough today. We read a text and quickly we have an opinion about it.
Exactly.
But we should first know a lot till we really come to a conclusion and reflect upon it.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially because, as I've often observed, it seems like the texts have almost, I call this like a holographic character, in that, say, a short text might be compressing ideas which are expanded upon in detail someplace else. And so to find the meaning of the, say, concise text, one has to look at the longer text, and that will expand upon the meaning. So if you just come across the short text, without having a sense of the complete body of text and the longer text that elaborate upon those ideas. One might come to quick opinions about it, but without a knowledge of the wider context, those opinions are likely to be inaccurate. Like even when we were taking the walk this morning, you mentioned the Bahia Suta. Yeah, so if you just look at the Bahia Suta, it's very almost cryptic, enigmatic. But there's another sutta, it's in the Anguttara Nikaya.
Right.
It's the Salayatana Samyutta, which has the same concise formula.
Context, though, a little
And then
bit,
it elaborates upon it in terms of the experience through the 6 sense bases. Take the microphone. Take the microphone.
Monday, I know a lot of even Buddhists are very critical about these rituals. But these rituals are found in every religion, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people, a lot of them want to criticize Buddhism, Buddhists who practice rituals.
A lot of Buddhists want to
Yeah.
criticize Buddhism.
Yeah, even Buddhists criticize their own people. But these rituals are found in every religion.
It's natural.
If you keep repeating,
Yeah.
repeating the thing all the time, it becomes a ritual.
Yeah.
I mean, you take your, say Lord's Prayer, and all this ends up becoming a ritual,
Yeah.
actually. But when the Buddhists do it, sometimes it's very wrong. They are not doing what the Buddha said or whatever, But and they're very critical.
Yeah.
But they don't see what this thing in their eye, They want to see what's happening outside.
Or the rituals have meaningful contents, and sometimes they're very, very moving. It can be very beautiful.
And also they say that about the worshipping the flowers to the Buddha.
Yeah.
That is supposed to be a meditation, where the impermanence, that beautiful flower,
Yeah.
fades and
Yeah.
becomes a meditation.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
again, there's a group of people who say, why do you want to pluck that flower? That flower belongs on the tree.
Yeah.
I mean, you can find fault in anything,
Anything more to say about the seed and the field simile?
No, not.
The karma. Who is quite happy?
Why don't
You're all happy with karma as the field, rather than karma as the genotype. Okay, so. I just want to find that very beautiful verse in the Dhammapada.
Well, like one of the things that I was thinking personally was that in the agriculture side of it, like the fields contain different.
Put the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I was saying that the field itself also contains potentiality. Different elements in the field are triggers to certain germinations. So that's what I was thinking that could help the concept, like in terms of the potential of, what it offers. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to be insistent that my interpretation is. Yeah, here's it's a very nice verse from the Dhammapada. Napu bagando pati vatameti nachandanang tagara mallikava satan chikando pati vatameti sabadisasa puriso pavayati. So the fragrance of flowers does not go against the wind, nor sandalwood, nor tagara. Tagara, we don't know what it is, a kind of fragrant shrub. And malika is jasmine, but it is the fragrance of the good, the saintly people that goes against the wind. The good person pervades all directions. Okay, anything else? Any further comments, questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
This is more of a general question in terms of when you're first confronted with scriptures, like the suttas that you haven't read before, and you go about them, like what is your advice in terms of reading them? If you read them slowly and very carefully, because they contain so much in some sentences, or if you read them, all of them, like, just read it all and then go back to it and start analyzing. Is it more, what have you found is more beneficial to...
Say the last sentence.
What do you think is more beneficial, like that it's a method?
Yeah, first, I don't suggest beginning at once trying to go through whole Nikayas. I put together that, this isn't like an advertisement, but it might appear to be that. I put together that book called In the Buddha's Words because first to have a more compressed version of the material in the Nikayas, but also...
He studied that one already. He studied that.
He studied it. Okay, but I'm for other people, it might be useful. So the reason also that I put that together is because if you just look in the Nikayas, there's no system to the arrangement of the suttas, except maybe the Samyutta Nikaya. Of course, the suttas are collected under topics, but otherwise, like the Majjhima Nikaya and Anguttara Nikaya, they just move from topic to topic. So what I try to do is to take a particular scheme which shows what I call the sequential unfolding of the Dhamma, from the simpler, more visible teachings to the deeper, more abstruse teachings. Okay, so I recommend that book to get like an overall sense of the pattern of the teaching. Then what I would suggest, if you want to go to a whole Nikaya, use taking the Majjhima Nikaya next. Because what I say is that the Majjhima Nikaya combines a great variety of teachings with, let's say, the teachings are longer and more substantial and more systematic than, say, in the Anguttara Nikaya or Samyutta Nikaya. Yeah, and so what I would say then when reading, this is what I did when I first started to get acquainted with the Nikayas. At that time we didn't have any anthology like the one that I compiled. So what I did was to read first in English from the PTS translations. I don't remember where I started, maybe with...
We start with Sutra number 1.
There isn't Sutta number 1, there are 4 Nikayas. I think I started maybe with the Majjhima Nikaya. Yeah, maybe I started with that. And then I would take notes on what I found to be interesting and important. Okay, and then while I was reading in the English translations, at that time I was learning Pali. And so then after I finished going through the 4 Nikayas and some books from the Khuddaka Nikaya in English translation, then I went back and again, this time I know that I started with the Majjhima Nikaya, reading in Pali. And then what I did was to make like a list of the important topics. And then when I would come across a passage that seemed to be important and was related to any of those key topics, then I would make a note and indicate the place where to find it. And so, yeah, that's what I did during my first couple of years as a monk, was to read through and sort of index the 4 Nikayas and the major books of this Khuddaka Nikaya. To read what?
Buddha's words.
Yeah,
So what you're saying is that covers things from all the Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, and Khuddaka Nikaya. Or
Yeah, pretty much from the four Nikayas. I think
Some
I
of the
took
important
only a
stuff.
few texts from the Khuddaka Nikaya.
okay, but not the Digha Nikaya.
No, I said the four Nikayas. The Digha Nikaya is one of the four Nikayas.
But not the Khuddaka then. Only those four.
No, I said some of the books from the Khuddaka Nikaya.
Okay, okay. So that's a good book then, because it covers some of the important things from all.
I think it's a good book.
No, I haven't read it yet. I plan on doing it sometime soon.
What is that?
I haven't bought the
I
book
think
yet.
one reviewer said, she said, if I were to be left on a desert island with only one book, this would be the book I would take.
No, I've seen that, but I haven't bought it. Thank you, Bhante. Even the others, most of it is in Buddha's words. Even Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara, a lot of that is in the Buddha's words also.
Of course, those are in the Buddha's words, but this book is just the title of the book in the Buddha's words. In order to, I actually had given it like a fancy title. I think I called it, because it was a phrase that occurs in one of the suttas, the manifestation of great radiance, an anthology of the Buddha's teachings. But Wisdom Publications wanted that book to serve as a college textbook and to attract the interest of people who want to know like what the Buddha himself actually taught according to the earliest sources. And so somebody is skimming through the list of titles and comes across the manifestation of great radiance, doesn't mean anything to them. But if they say in the Buddha's words, then this might be the college textbook that I as a professor should be ordering for my class.
Thank you, Bhante.
And so in that way, it's been quite a bestseller. Not on a New York Times bestselling list, but it gets a lot of orders by college for teaching in college classes on either world religions or introduction to Buddhism. Okay, anything else? Okay, then we could close for the day. Okay, so we'll end again with 3 half bows.